slow, calm tone, a quiet reflection before the story begins. There's a certain kind of silence that only traders know, the kind that fills the room after midnight when the charts glow like distant galaxies. The world sleeps, but you don't, because somewhere out there numbers are moving and you feel like you should be too. You tell yourself it's commitment. You call it ambition, but deep down you know it's fear. Fear of missing, fear of falling behind, fear of resting while the market breathes without you. In crypto, there is no closing bell, no pause, no mercy. The market runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And in a world that never stops your discipline, your sleep discipline becomes your last defense against chaos. This is not a story about charts or coins. It's a story about the mind, about what happens when control turns to obsession, and how stillness becomes the ultimate edge. Welcome to Mind Over Markets. Welcome to Crypto 24/7 Sleep Discipline and Alert Design. I used to think the secret to success in crypto was being awake longer than everyone else. I thought that if I could watch every candle, catch every move, and never miss a shift, I'd somehow stay ahead. But the truth was simpler and far darker. The more I tried to stay awake, the more asleep I became. There's something about a market that never closes. It makes you believe you shouldn't either. You start living by the rhythm of something that has no rhythm at all. Your days blur into nights, your coffee becomes your dinner, and your pulse starts syncing with the chart. And in that chaos, you call it discipline. You call it dedication. But it's not. It's fear. Fear of missing out. Fear of losing control. Fear that the moment you rest, the world will move without you. I used to lie in bed with my phone on the pillow, one eye open, waiting for an alert that might never come. And every time I drifted off, I dreamed of price charts, green and red waves, crashing over me like an ocean that never slept. And when I woke, I wasn't rested. I was already behind. You see, crypto is not like other markets. It doesn't care about your time zone. It doesn't stop for your meals or your family or your heartbeat. It spins endlessly indifferent. And somewhere along the line, I mistook that indifference for opportunity. I thought being constantly alert made me powerful, but what it really made me was powerless, a servant to volatility, because in a 24/7 market, there's always a reason to stay awake, and that's the trap, the illusion of control. When you stare at the chart long enough, you start to believe you can bend it, that somehow your attention itself gives you influence, that if you're vigilant enough, the losses won't find you. But markets don't reward attention. They reward clarity. And clarity dies without rest. I began to realize I wasn't losing trades because I didn't know what I was doing. I was losing because I was too tired to do it right. My reaction time slowed. My decision-making blurred. I chased entries that weren't mine to take and held on to positions long after my logic had left the room. I was gambling on adrenaline. And the worst part was I called it focus. Crypto is seductive because it mimics the mind, always moving, never still. But your power as a trader doesn't come from matching its speed. It comes from moving slower, from knowing when to step back, from having the discipline to let go even when every part of you screams to stay. I remember one night in particular, Bitcoin had just broken a key level and my screen was glowing in the dark like an altar. Every tick was a heartbeat. I could feel the rush of possibility, the same chemical cocktail that gamblers feel when they pull a lever. And I told myself I'd just stay for a few more minutes. But minutes turned into hours, and hours turned into a blur of charts, tweets, and caffeine. When I finally crashed, the market had reversed. My setup was invalid. And I sat there realizing I hadn't lost because of the chart. I'd lost because I had no boundaries. That's when I started asking myself harder questions. What if discipline isn't about how much I trade, but about when I don't? What if mastery isn't control but surrender? See, sleep isn't a weakness, it's a form of trust. Trust that your plan will hold. Trust that your system doesn't need you watching every tick. Trust that rest itself is part of your edge. The market never sleeps, but maybe that's exactly why you should. Because when you don't rest, you stop seeing the market for what it is. You start seeing what you want it to be. You start trading emotions, not patterns. Hope becomes your strategy and fatigue your entry signal. And in that state, every small move feels personal, as if the universe itself is testing your patience. But it's not the universe, it's your nervous system, begging you to slow down. I learned that sleep discipline isn't about being lazy, it's about protecting perception. Because without clarity, even the best strategy is blind. And no alert in the world can save a trader who's already mentally exhausted. There's a strange paradox in trading psychology. The more you try to control the uncontrollable, the more chaotic you become. But the more you surrender to uncertainty, the more centered you are. Sleep is that surrender. It's the moment you let go of the illusion that your presence determines profit. I used to think I could outsmart randomness. Now I just try to outlast it. And to outlast something, you have to recover. You have to breathe. You have to rest. Sleep became my new risk management tool, not just for my body, but for my mind. Because the truth is, fatigue doesn't just make you tired, it makes you emotional. It magnifies losses and amplifies doubt. It turns every red candle into a personal failure, and every green one into proof that you're still alive. When I began treating rest like an investment, everything changed. My reactions slowed, but my clarity sharpened. My entries became fewer, but more intentional. And most importantly, I stopped needing to catch every move. I started waiting for the ones that aligned with me. That's what trading psychology really is, alignment. Between your system and your state of mind. Between your strategy and your biology. Between action and stillness. Crypto tempts you to be constant, but the secret is to be consistent. Consistency isn't about being awake, it's about being ready. And you can't be ready if you're restless. I started designing my life differently. Instead of sleeping when the market allowed me, I slept when I decided to. Instead of reacting to alerts, I built a system that respected my boundaries. I realized that alerts aren't there to enslave you, they're there to free you. A proper alert system is an extension of discipline, not addiction. It's the bridge between awareness and peace, because when you know the system will wake you for what matters, you can finally let go of what doesn't. I stopped checking my phone every hour. I stopped needing to be the first to know. And something beautiful happened. My anxiety went silent. I could look at the chart again without feeling my pulse spike. I could see opportunity without urgency. That's the quiet nobody tells you about. The quiet of knowing you've done enough for the day. The quiet of trusting that tomorrow's move will wait for you. Because the truth is, opportunities don't vanish overnight. But your focus, man, crypto will make you believe you're in competition with time. But time isn't your enemy. It's your teacher. Every missed trade, every night of rest, every pause teaches you something about control. And in that space between impulse and action, you find freedom. When I look back, I realize my greatest profits didn't come from perfect entries. They came from moments when I chose restraint, when I decided to sleep instead of chase, when I trusted my preparation more than my fear. And those moments taught me more about wealth than any bull run ever could. Because wealth isn't measured by gains, it's measured by peace. If you have to sacrifice your mind to grow your portfolio, you're not trading anymore, you're escaping. You're running from stillness because stillness feels like missing out. But stillness is where insight lives. And that's the paradox of trading psychology. You can only master the market when you stop needing to. You can only hold your edge when you stop fighting time. You can only win when you stop fearing the pause. Now, when I turn off my screens, I don't feel guilt. I feel gratitude because I know that every hour of rest is another layer of armor. Every good night's sleep is another step toward mastery. And mastery isn't about knowing everything. It's about being ready for anything. The longer I traded, the more I realized that most of my suffering didn't come from the market. It came from the space between two alerts, the waiting, the imagining, the endless rehearsal of what could go wrong. That space became my real battlefield. When you stare into volatility long enough, it starts to stare back. Every chart becomes a mirror. Every candle reveals a fragment of who you are, your fear, your greed, your doubt. And the cruel irony is that the more you try to master the market, the more it exposes the parts of yourself you refuse to master. So I began asking, if the market never sleeps and I never rest, who's really in control here? I wanted to believe I was the architect of my strategy, but I was behaving like a guard, standing endless watch over a fortress that didn't need protection. Each night I watched the same lines, move the same patterns, form the same emotions, repeat, and I mistook motion for progress. It felt like work. It felt like dedication. But it was addiction dressed as ambition. There's a subtle line between passion and obsession. One builds endurance, the other erodes perception. I used to think that more data meant more certainty. So I drowned myself in charts, indicators, news feeds, Discord servers. But information without rest becomes noise, and noise breeds anxiety. The more I consumed, the less I knew. The more I watched, the less I saw. Clarity doesn't live in constant observation. It lives in silence. And silence only visits those who are willing to stop looking. I started to see the absurdity of my own rituals. The way I'd wake at 3 a.m. to check a candle that had barely moved, the way I'd feel victorious for catching a 5-minute swing, and yet spend the next hour refreshing my P&L as if that moment defined my worth. It wasn't trading anymore. It was performance. A performance for no audience in a theater of fear. Somewhere in that fatigue, I remembered something an old mentor once said: "The market is not here to reward your effort. It's here to measure your balance." That sentence haunted me, because balance was the one thing I didn't have. So I began to rebuild from the inside out. First, I designed my alerts not as traps to wake me, but as boundaries to protect me. I chose the levels that truly mattered, the ones connected to my thesis, not my emotions. I let the rest go. Every alert became a statement. If it doesn't reach this point, it's not my business. It was strange how liberating that felt, because the moment I trusted the system to call me when it mattered, I finally had permission to live again. I went for walks. I read. I slept. And when the alert came, it didn't jolt me. It guided me. It was no longer an interruption. It was a conversation. That's the essence of alert design, creating a dialogue with the market that respects both sides. You listen, but you don't beg for attention. You observe, but you don't obsess. You let technology serve awareness instead of anxiety. It taught me something profound about control. Control is not the ability to react instantly. Control is the ability to remain calm until action is required. In the stillness between two alerts, I began to see the rhythm of trading: inhale and exhale, expansion and contraction, chaos and pause. Every market has a heartbeat, but you can only hear it when yours slows down. There's a sacred symmetry between sleep and discipline. Both are forms of surrender. And surrender, paradoxically, is what grants you mastery. When I started sleeping on purpose, not from exhaustion but from choice, I began to feel time differently. Hours stopped feeling like opportunities to chase. They became spaces to recover, to think, to let insights settle. I noticed that my best ideas didn't come while staring at the screen. They arrived while I was away in the shower, on a walk sometimes, right before I fell asleep. Because the subconscious mind never stops trading. It processes patterns long after the conscious one has shut down. The difference is the subconscious doesn't panic. It observes quietly. It connects dots without interference. That's what sleep does. It gives your deeper mind a turn at the wheel. Without that handover, you become a driver who refuses to rest. Eventually, you crash. Most traders think they burn out from losses, but they actually burn out from vigilance. Constant alertness is a slow form of self-erasure. You lose the ability to step back, to zoom out, to see context. And when context disappears, everything feels urgent. Urgency is the enemy of wisdom. There were nights when I would sit, eyes fixed on a flashing price, and whisper to myself, just one more candle, just one more confirmation. But the truth was, I wasn't waiting for confirmation, I was waiting for relief. Relief from the anxiety of not knowing. And that's the real addiction, not to profit, but to certainty. Trading teaches you that certainty is a myth, yet the mind keeps craving it like oxygen. You build systems, strategies, alerts not to know, but to cope with not knowing. When I accepted that, everything softened. The need to predict dissolved into the willingness to respond. And response requires rest, because only a rested mind can tell the difference between impulse and intuition. There's a moment every trader knows, the instant before clicking the button, when something inside you whispers either yes or no. That whisper is your edge. But if you're exhausted, you can't hear it. Noise drowns it out. Caffeine replaces it with confidence. And then you call your mistakes bad luck. They're not luck. They're signals you were too tired to hear. So I started to treat sleep like data. If I hadn't slept, I didn't trade. If I felt foggy, I stayed flat. Because no setup is worth executing from weakness. Markets reward patience, not presence. You don't need to be there all the time. You need to be right when you are. Sometimes the best trade is closing the laptop. Sometimes the smartest position is rest. I began journaling not just my trades, but my states of mind. I tracked how fatigue influenced my risk tolerance, how rest sharpened my objectivity. Patterns emerged clearer than any chart. Fatigue bred FOMO. Rest bred discipline. And in that pattern lay the quiet truth: performance follows energy. You can't trade well from depletion. You can't think clearly in chaos, and you can't find balance if you refuse to pause. One evening, as I wrote in that journal, I realized something that changed everything. My goal isn't to master the market. It's to master the mind that meets it. That single line became my compass. Because the market is a mirror, not an opponent. It reflects your level of inner order. If you're restless, it looks volatile. If you're grounded, it looks patterned. The same chart, two different minds, two different worlds. So the work was never about crypto. It was always about consciousness. The more I practiced stillness, the more precision I found. Not because the market got easier, but because I stopped fighting its nature. I started designing my environment like I designed my trades intentionally. Lighting that signaled evening, no screens in the bedroom, a cutoff hour where charts became off limits. And it wasn't easy. Discipline rarely is. There were nights I broke my own rules, snuck a look, justified it as research. And the next morning, my performance proved the cost. Sluggish thought, reactive entries, emotional exits. Every violation of sleep discipline came with an invoice, and the market always collected. Over time, that pain became my teacher, because discipline isn't built from willpower. It's built from remembering the cost of chaos. Now, when I hear traders brag about never sleeping, I don't feel impressed. I feel concern, because I know what it feels like to chase the sun around the world, hoping it will illuminate certainty. It never does. There's a humility that comes with rest. When I close my eyes, I'm reminded that the world moves without me, and that's okay, because my job isn't to control the flow. My job is to learn how to swim without drowning. The market will always be there when I wake, but if I burn out, I won't. So I choose the long game. I choose to value clarity over adrenaline. I choose to sleep. And in that simple, almost defiant act, I reclaim control, because true control doesn't mean watching every candle. It means knowing when to turn away. The more I slowed down, the more I began to see what had always been invisible, the architecture of awareness itself. I used to think awareness meant being alert, scanning every movement, analyzing every candle. But real awareness is not about vigilance. It's about vision. It's the quiet knowing that arises when the noise has run out of breath. When you've stared at volatility long enough, something strange happens. The chaos starts to lose its teeth. The market stops feeling like a threat and begins to look like a teacher. Every spike, every dump, every false breakout whispers a lesson about your own mind. And if you listen closely, you realize the market is always saying the same thing: be still. Because only in stillness can you see what's true, not what's loud, not what's urgent, what's true. I remember a morning when I woke to a massive move I hadn't caught. Old me would have panicked, punished myself, sworn never to sleep again. But this time, I just sat there breathing. I watched the chart, but I didn't feel small. I felt grateful, because missing the move reminded me that I'd chosen peace over panic, and peace had finally started to pay. The market had moved without me, but I hadn't moved against myself. That was a profit no spreadsheet could measure. That's the paradox of awareness. When you stop trying to watch everything, you finally start to see. When you stop reacting, you start perceiving. And perception is where intuition lives. Intuition isn't magic. It's pattern recognition built on rest. When your mind is calm, it begins to connect dots that tension hides. You notice rhythm and randomness, proportion and chaos. The subconscious whispers, and for once you can hear it. That's when trading becomes art. Not because you predict perfectly, but because you participate consciously. Most traders chase information. Few cultivate awareness. Information tells you what happened. Awareness tells you why you care. And when you understand why you care, you stop being manipulated by motion. The longer I practiced this discipline of rest, the more I noticed another truth. Rest itself is strategy. It's the invisible edge. Everyone talks about risk-reward ratios, entries, and setups, but few speak about cognitive liquidity. The energy of your mind is a finite asset. If you spend it on anxiety, you won't have any left for precision. So I began to treat my attention like capital. Every glance at the chart was a trade. Every thought of fear was a withdrawal. And sleep was the deposit that refilled the account. It reframed everything. Instead of chasing opportunity, I started managing capacity. Because what good is opportunity if you're too exhausted to seize it? There's a rhythm to high performance that mirrors the tides. Push, retreat, push, retreat. Crypto's danger is that it never retreats, and so neither do we. But the ocean doesn't need permission to pull back, it simply does. That's why it never runs dry. So now when I step away from the screens, I imagine myself as that tide pulling back, preparing power for the next wave. Rest is not absence, it's accumulation. The more I respected that rhythm, the more sustainable my trading became. Wins stopped feeling euphoric. Losses stopped feeling fatal. They were just notes in a longer song. And when the tempo slowed, I didn't rush to fill the silence. I listened. Because the silence between trades holds more wisdom than the noise within them. There's a subtle shift that happens when you finally trust yourself enough to rest. You stop reacting to price. You start responding to principle. Your identity detaches from outcome. You no longer need the market to validate your worth. You simply show up, execute, and release. That release is liberation. It's the moment you realize control was never about holding tighter. It was about holding lighter. I used to grip every position like it was life or death. Now I hold them like breath, inhale, exhale. The inhale is analysis. The exhale is acceptance. Both are necessary. Neither can last forever. Awareness is not the opposite of sleep. It's born from it. The rested mind sees the hidden order beneath apparent chaos. The fatigued mind invents chaos where none exists. Sometimes I think back to the sleepless version of myself, the one hunched over charts at 2 a.m., chasing every flicker of green. I don't judge him anymore. He was trying to find certainty in a world that offered none. He thought more effort would buy more control. But control isn't earned through effort. It's revealed through equilibrium. The market isn't punishing you when it moves without you. It's reminding you that you're not the center. And paradoxically, that realization brings relief. Because once you accept you're not the axis, you can finally move freely around it. That's what awareness feels like: lightness. Not apathy, not detachment, just freedom. Freedom from the need to know everything before you act. Freedom from the illusion that more watching equals more winning. Freedom from yourself. In those quiet moments of wakefulness after deep sleep, when the mind is clear and the body unguarded, I sometimes look at the chart and smile. Not because it's up or down, but because it's alive, and so am I. And that's enough. I've come to see that trading is less about markets and more about mirrors. Every candle tests your capacity for patience. Every breakout tempts your ego. Every pullback questions your faith. But beyond all those patterns lies a single inquiry. Can you remain centered while everything moves? That's the true practice. Not trading the market, but trading your reactions to it. The irony is that discipline and surrender are the same movement seen from two sides. Discipline is the decision to act with intention. Surrender is the wisdom to stop when intention ends. Sleep, rest, reflection. They are forms of surrender that fortify discipline. The more I lived this truth, the less dramatic trading became. The highs softened. The lows deepened into learning. The entire experience became more human, less heroic. And that's where longevity lives. You can sprint on caffeine and chaos for a season, but if you want to last decades, you must build rhythm into your psyche, periods of silence, darkness, distance. They're not breaks from the market. They're parts of it, like the pauses between waves. Sometimes people ask me how I design my alerts now. I tell them it's simple few alerts. Precise triggers, long silence. Because an alert is a promise you're telling yourself that when it sounds, you'll be ready. And readiness is born in rest. So I choose my thresholds carefully. I let the market do its dance unobserved. And when the bell rings, I step in with clarity like a guest invited rather than a spy intruding. That difference, invitation versus intrusion, changes everything. It turns trading from survival into dialogue. You stop trying to predict, you start to participate. Every trade becomes a question. Am I aligned? If the answer is yes, I act. If not, I wait. Sometimes I wait days, sometimes I wait weeks. But waiting is not wasting, it's gathering strength. In a world obsessed with speed, patience is rebellion. And rebellion, when rooted in awareness, becomes elegance. There's a quiet beauty in knowing you don't have to chase, that the market will still be there tomorrow. That opportunity is infinite, but attention is not. So you guard attention the way you guard capital. You spend it wisely. As I speak these words, I think about all the traders still awake somewhere, watching, scrolling, refreshing. I understand them. I was them. But I wish I could tell them this. The chart doesn't need you. But your mind, your body, your life, they do. There's a world outside the glow of screens, a world that feeds the very clarity you're chasing. Go there, sleep deeply, return slowly. The market will welcome you with new eyes. Because when you rest, you reset the lens through which you see. And sometimes that new lens is the difference between chaos and pattern, between despair and patience, between loss and lesson. Rest is not the absence of ambition, it's the alignment of it. When I understood that, I stopped feeling guilty for sleeping. I started feeling strategic, because every minute I wasn't watching was a minute I was preparing. Preparation is invisible, but it's what separates gamblers from professionals. The professional doesn't fear missing out, he fears burning out. He knows that one rested decision outweighs 100 reactive ones. He knows that stillness compounds just like capital. And he knows that awareness, once expanded through rest, never contracts. So now, before I close my eyes each night, I say a quiet mantra: let the market move. I will move when it's time. And in that surrender lies strength. Because when the world never sleeps, choosing to rest is the ultimate act of confidence. There came a point when I stopped counting days in profits and losses. I started counting them in clarity. Because the longer I traded, the more I saw that every chart, every candle, every surge was simply a mirror, reflecting my state of mind. When I was restless, the market looked violent. When I was calm, it looked logical. When I was centered, it looked beautiful. The chart had never changed. I had. That realization felt like a quiet revolution, because for the first time I understood that the goal was never to dominate the market. It was to dissolve into rhythm with it, to move when it moves, to rest when it rests, to breathe when it breathes. Crypto taught me this paradox. The more I tried to win, the more I lost myself. But the more I sought balance, the more everything else aligned. Naturally results performance, confidence, peace. The market is not a place of competition. It's a place of reflection. Every loss is an echo of an imbalance inside you. Every win is a whisper that for one fleeting moment you were aligned. And that alignment is fragile. It demands humility. It demands that you respect your biology as much as your strategy. I used to glorify the traders who never stopped, those who lived on screens, slept in bursts, fueled by caffeine and adrenaline. They looked powerful, invincible, relentless, but beneath that intensity was exhaustion, and beneath exhaustion was fear. Fear of being irrelevant, fear of slowing down, fear of silence. It took me years to learn that silence isn't absence, it's presence in its purest form. When I finally began to sleep deeply without guilt, I noticed something extraordinary. The market felt slower, not because it changed speed, but because I had stopped racing it. The noise thinned, the patterns became clear, and for the first time trading felt peaceful. I had become the observer again, the role I was meant to play all along. There's an elegance in neutrality. When you no longer crave a specific outcome, you can see truth without distortion. A red candle doesn't frighten you, it informs you. A pump doesn't excite you, it signals structure. Everything becomes data, and data becomes dialogue. That's what emotional neutrality really is, not detachment, but intimacy without dependence. You're close enough to understand, yet far enough to remain free. It's the same balance that sleep gives you. Every night you let go of control. You surrender consciousness itself, trusting that you'll return renewed. That same trust applied to trading becomes mastery. You trust your plan. You trust your process. You trust that the universe doesn't owe you anything, but it will reflect back exactly who you are. When I stopped needing to win, I started to grow. When I stopped fearing loss, I began to see opportunity with clarity. And when I stopped resisting rest, I began to understand discipline, not as punishment, but as devotion. Because true discipline isn't rigid, it's compassionate. It honors both action and stillness, knowing they are halves of the same whole. Sleep alert design, patience awareness, they're not separate tools. They are facets of the same principle: respect for your own limits. The ego hates limits. It wants more data, more action, more validation. But the soul doesn't chase expansion, it seeks harmony. And harmony can't exist without boundaries. That's what my alerts became: boundaries that protected peace. Not walls to keep the market out, but windows to let only the essential light in. Each alert, each pause, each night of sleep became an act of saying, I trust what I've built. And that trust freed me from the endless need to monitor, to control, to prove. Because the truth is, nothing meaningful in life can be forced, not sleep, not success, not insight. They emerge when you create the conditions for them to appear. The mind that never rests is like water that never settles. It cannot reflect anything clearly. But when it finally grows still, the reflection becomes perfect. That stillness earned through discipline and rest is what separates those who survive from those who burn out. Because the longer you trade, the more you realize survival is the strategy. Not glory, not adrenaline, not catching every move, just staying clear enough, long enough to see truth consistently. And truth in this world compounds. The more you honor it, the stronger it becomes. Now, when I speak to newer traders, I don't talk about setups first. I talk about sleep, about morning rituals, about how to end the day without carrying it into your dreams. Because the mental hygiene of trading is more important than any technical skill. A rested mind will find the pattern. A restless one will invent it. Every decision you make comes from the quality of your state, and your state begins with rest. You cannot trade clarity if you live in chaos. You cannot trade probability if you're ruled by emotion, and you cannot trade awareness if you deny yourself stillness. There was a night not long ago when I shut down all my screens before midnight. No alerts, no notifications, just silence. Outside, the wind moved softly through the trees. The world didn't need my attention. For the first time in a long time, neither did the market. When I woke the next morning, I didn't reach for my phone. I just breathed. The air felt sharper, my thoughts lighter. Later, when I did open the charts, I saw what I hadn't noticed before: a structure forming, clean, deliberate. It wasn't new. It had always been there. I just hadn't been still enough to see it. And that's the lesson sleep teaches better than any mentor. You don't gain awareness by trying harder. You gain it by stepping aside. There's a wisdom that only fatigue can reveal. Because when you're exhausted enough, when the noise has finally broken, something inside whispers, there must be another way. That whisper is the beginning of awakening. Awakening isn't dramatic. It's quiet. It's when you stop demanding that the world move faster than your peace. It's when you realize that success isn't found in perpetual motion, but in graceful rhythm. Crypto moves 24 hours a day, but that doesn't mean I have to. My power lies in choosing when to move. And that choice, that sovereignty, is the essence of trading psychology. Because psychology isn't about fixing emotions, it's about understanding their place in the dance. Fear keeps you cautious. Greed keeps you ambitious. Fatigue reminds you you're human. Sleep brings you back to balance. I once believed mastery meant eliminating emotion. Now I know it means integrating it, letting it inform but not control, letting it speak but not shout. The mind is like a house full of guests, each emotion knocking at the door. You don't have to let them stay the night. You simply acknowledge them, learn from them, and let them pass. Sleep is the reset that clears the house. Each morning you wake to a new space, fresh, unburdened, capable of seeing, without yesterday's dust. And with that clarity comes grace. grace to lose without bitterness, grace to win without arrogance, grace to keep showing up day after day steady and awake. That's what true trading mastery feels like, not a constant high, but a constant harmony, not excitement, but equilibrium, not control, but confidence in uncertainty. There's freedom in that space, freedom to step away, to live, to love, to be human. Because the more you cling to the market, the smaller your world becomes. But the more you build a life around awareness, the more expansive every moment feels. The market is infinite, yes, but so is presence. And presence is the only currency that never loses value. These days, I end my sessions the same way. I close the chart, I breathe, and I whisper to myself, you don't need to chase the market. You need to understand it. And to understand it, you must rest. That sentence is my compass, my protection, my philosophy. Because at the end of the day, trading isn't about outworking the world. It's about outgrowing the noise inside you. The world will always be 24/7, but peace is on your schedule. And when you master that, the market stops being a storm. It becomes a mirror reflecting back your stillness. You don't have to be everywhere. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to catch every move. You just have to be awake when it matters. And for that, you must dare to sleep. The market will never sleep. It will rise and fall without your permission. It will tempt you, test you, tease you, whispering that you're missing out while you rest. But the truth is, rest is not the enemy of progress. It's the foundation of it. Every hour of sleep is a silent investment in clarity. Every moment of stillness is a position in strength. And every time you choose peace over panic, you remind the market and yourself who's truly in control. Because mastery isn't found in constant motion. It's found in measured presence. It's found in the space between action and awareness. It's found when you dare to close your eyes. So sleep deeply, trade consciously, and remember the goal was never to beat the market. It was to understand yourself inside it. You've been listening to Mind Over Markets. Until next time, rest well, trade with clarity, and let your stillness speak louder than your fear.